Imagine planning the most epic birthday party of your life, only for your HOA's pettiest Karen to shut it down. But what if I told you I got the last laugh in a way she never saw coming? Buckle up, because this is one for the history books. I had been waiting for this birthday for months. Not just because I loved celebrating, but because this year I was going all out. I'm talking food trucks, a DJ, a massive bounce house, and enough neon party lights to make my backyard look like a mini Coachella. It wasn't just a party, it was going to be an experience. My friends were pumped, my family was flying in, and every detail was falling into place. It was the type of celebration that would be talked about for years. There was just one problem. Or, more accurately, one person. Karen. If you live in an HOA-run neighborhood, you know exactly who I'm talking about. That one person who treats the HOA rules like their personal book of law and somehow gets a power trip from making other people miserable. That's Karen. The woman who once threatened to fine a neighbor because their holiday lights were too festive. The same woman who measured my grass with a ruler to make sure it was HOA compliant. I knew she was going to be an issue, but I thought I had covered my bases. I checked the HOA rules. Nowhere did it say I couldn't throw a private party on my own property. The noise restrictions? Totally within legal limits. I even warned my neighbors in advance to avoid any complaints. But Karen? Oh, she didn't need rules to ruin things. Just her own personal agenda. The first sign of trouble came when she, accidentally, overheard me talking about the party. I was in my driveway, finalizing details over the phone, when I noticed her across the street, arms crossed, lips pursed. A few minutes later, she strutted over, fake smile plastered on her face. "Oh, I couldn't help but hear," she started, voice dripping with condescension. "You're having a little gathering?" I should have lied. I should have told her it was a Bible study meeting or a Tupperware party, anything to avoid what came next. Instead, like an idiot, I said, "Yeah, it's my birthday, so I'm throwing a big party in the backyard." Karen's fake smile twitched. "Oh, how lovely. I should have known then." That one word, lovely, in that tone, it was a declaration of war. The very next day, I found a notice taped to my door. An official-looking HOA complaint, citing unauthorized event planning, potential noise violations, and unapproved structures. I barely got through reading it before my phone started blowing up with texts from neighbors. Karen had personally gone door to door, warning everyone about my illegal, disruptive, and unacceptable party. She claimed it would bring strangers into the community, cause property damage, and devalue homes. She even said the bounce house posed an environmental hazard. Let me repeat that. A bounce house was a hazard. I tried to be reasonable. I called the HOA board to clear things up, but surprise, surprise, Karen was on the board. And guess who had already convinced them that my party was a threat to the entire neighborhood? I was furious. I went over to Karen's house, trying to settle things like adults. The moment she opened the door, she gave me the most punchable smile I'd ever seen. "I'm so sorry, but rules are rules," she said, fake sympathy dripping from her voice. "You really should have checked before planning something so disruptive." I clenched my jaw. I did check. And there's nothing in the bylaws that says I can't have a party. She gave a little tisk-tisk noise. Well, the board had a special emergency meeting, meaning, she bullied them into agreeing with her, and we've decided that large-scale events are simply not in line with the community's values. I stared at her. "Since when?" She smiled. "Since now." And just like that, my party was officially banned. I'd love to say I handled it gracefully. That I nodded, smiled, and walked away with dignity. Nope. I walked straight back to my house, slammed the door, and started plotting revenge. Because here's the thing. If Karen thought she could ruin my birthday, she had another thing coming. If I couldn't have a party, I was about to give this neighborhood the most ridiculous, over-the-top spectacle it had ever seen. Something so outrageous, so obnoxiously fun, that even the most power-hungry HOA tyrant wouldn't be able to stop it. I picked up my phone, dialed a number, and the moment someone answered, I grinned. "What's the biggest inflatable structure you guys can build?" The voice on the other end hesitated before asking, how big are we talking? I leaned back, eyes locked on Karen's house through my window. As big as an entire home. The idea came to me in a fit of pure, petty inspiration. Karen thought she had one, but she had no idea who she was dealing with. If I couldn't have a party, fine. I'd respect the technicality. But nothing in the bylaws said I couldn't turn my entire house into an inflatable wonderland. I spent hours researching bounce house companies, looking for the most ridiculous, over-the-top monstrosity I could get my hands on. Most places specialized in standard inflatables, castles, slides, obstacle courses. Cute, but not enough. I needed something so absurd, so inescapably obnoxious, that it would make Karen's head explode. Then I found it. A company that custom-designed inflatable structures for large events. I explained my idea to them, half expecting them to laugh me off the phone. Instead, the guy on the other end was thrilled. "You want a full-scale inflatable house?" he asked, as if I'd just handed him the challenge of a lifetime. "Bigger," I said. "I want my actual house covered in it. Like a second skin. I want inflatable walls, a roof, and a front yard that looks like a carnival exploded." He paused. "That is completely insane." I grinned. "So, can you do it? Give us a week." 7 agonizingly slow days passed. I kept the entire thing under wraps, refusing to let any of my neighbors know what was coming. Karen, of course, thought she had successfully crushed my spirit. Every time I saw her, she had that smug, self-satisfied grin, the one that said, "I won." She had no idea what was coming. On the morning of the big reveal, a convoy of trucks rolled into the neighborhood. They were loaded with massive, rolled-up inflatables, industrial fans, and a crew of engineers who looked far too excited for what they were about to do. The first part was simple, installing a gigantic, inflatable dome over my entire house. Within hours, my once normal home was encased in a colorful, air-filled monstrosity. The walls? Bright neon blue and pink. The roof? A full-blown inflatable castle turret. The front yard? A sprawling bounce house playground. I even had an inflatable archway over my driveway that read, "Welcome to Bounce City, home of HOA nightmares." By the time we were halfway done, the neighborhood had gathered in full force. Kids were screaming in excitement, neighbors were filming, and Karen? Karen was having a meltdown right there on the sidewalk. She came storming over, red-faced and seething. What the hell is this?" she shrieked, gesturing wildly at the inflatable fortress taking over my property. I smiled. "Oh, this? Just a little home improvement project. This is outrageous. This is a violation of the HOA bylaws." I pulled out a printed copy of the HOA rulebook and flipped to the relevant page. "Actually, Karen, there's nothing in here about temporary inflatable structures." Her mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. This is a nuisance. A safety hazard." "Funny, that's what you said about my party," I mused. "Which, by the way, isn't happening anymore. I'm just decorating." She turned to the HOA board members, who had started gathering nearby, desperate for backup. "You can't allow this. This is an eyesore. It'll bring down property values." One of the board members, a guy named Greg, rubbed his chin. "Well, technically, it's not breaking any rules." Karen's eyes bugged out of her head. "Are you kidding me?" Greg shrugged. "I mean, I don't like it, but if we allow holiday decorations for months at a time, I don't see why this is different." Karen let out a strangled noise somewhere between a shriek and a dying goat. Meanwhile, I made sure to take my pettiness up a notch. Everywhere Karen turned, I had added something more ridiculous. A gigantic inflatable slide leading from my second-floor balcony to the yard? Check. A 50-foot inflatable wacky waving arm guy? Double check. An inflatable throne in my front yard where I could sit like a king of chaos? Triple check. Karen was losing her mind, and I was having the time of my life. She spent the entire day calling everyone she could think of. The HOA, the city council, even the police. Every single time, she got the same answer. Sorry, ma'am. It's temporary and not against any laws. At one point, she even tried to physically block the workers from installing more inflatable decorations. That lasted all of 30 seconds before one of the crew members handed her a waiver to sign, stating that if she got hurt interfering with the build, she'd be legally responsible. She backed off real quick. By sunset, the entire neighborhood was in awe. Kids were begging to play on my property, parents were laughing, and a few neighbors even offered me drinks, cheering me on for standing up to Karen's reign of terror. The best part? My bounce house empire was getting national attention. A few of my social media posts about it had gone viral, and I had news outlets reaching out for interviews. Karen, on the other hand? She was livid. Her final attempt to ruin things came late that evening. She marched right up to me as I lounged in my inflatable throne, looking more stressed than ever. "You think this is funny?" she spat. I sipped my drink. "I think it's hilarious." "This isn't over," she hissed. "You have no idea who you're messing with." I smirked. "Oh, Karen. You have no idea how far I'm willing to take this." She stormed off, and I leaned back, watching the glow of my neon bounce house against the night sky. Little did I know, Karen was already plotting her next move. But what she didn't realize, I was always 5 steps ahead. The neighborhood had never seen anything like it. My house, no, my bounce house fortress, was now the talk of the town. Kids were sneaking onto my property just to touch the walls, neighbors were openly laughing in the streets, and Karen? Karen was on the verge of combustion. She had spent the entire night sending frantic emails to the HOA board, demanding an emergency meeting. Apparently, she had convinced herself that my inflatable kingdom was the beginning of the end for the community. A blight on the neighborhood, she called it. The next morning, I woke up to find a new HOA letter taped to my door. This one was much angrier than the last. It claimed my temporary structure was a violation of property aesthetics, and that I had 1 week to remove it before facing further consequences. I took a deep breath, sipping my coffee as I read it over. They thought this was over? Oh no. I grabbed my phone and posted the letter to my now viral social media pages with the caption, "HOA is trying to take down my legally approved bounce house home. Should I comply, or double down?" The internet went wild. Within hours, my inbox was flooded with messages of support. People were offering legal advice, suggesting more inflatable additions, and even offering donations to keep the battle going. Someone suggested I rent out space in the bounce house for Airbnb just to further enrage Karen. I had options, but first I wanted to see just how far Karen would take this. That afternoon, the HOA called an emergency meeting, and Karen was leading the charge. She was standing at the head of the room, practically shaking with rage as she waved printed screenshots of my viral post. "This is outrageous," she barked. "Our community is becoming a joke. We're on the news, we're being mocked online. This is a disaster." The board members looked tired. Greg, the only sane one in the room, cleared his throat. "Well, technically, there's no rule." "Then make one." Karen shrieked. A murmur spread through the board. That wasn't how things worked. You can't just change rules because of personal vendettas. But Karen was too far gone to see that. I sat in the back, arms crossed, waiting for my moment. "We need to put this to a vote," one of the board members said. "Any new rule needs a neighborhood-wide approval." Karen's face twitched. She hated that. Because she knew, she didn't have the numbers. See, Karen had spent years terrorizing this neighborhood, fining people over lawn decorations, Christmas lights, and mailbox colors. She had spent so long playing the HOA dictator, she had forgotten something important. Nobody actually liked her. The vote went live in the HOA portal that night. Within an hour, votes against banning inflatables were skyrocketing. People weren't just voting against Karen, they were actively commenting, sharing every petty thing she had ever done. She once fined me for having a red door. She told my grandma her wheelchair ramp clashed with the aesthetic. She called my son's sidewalk chalk graffiti. The entire neighborhood was uniting against Karen. And then, just when I thought it couldn't get any better, someone found Karen's biggest HOA violation yet. A neighbor posted old construction records proving that Karen's own backyard patio was illegally extended years ago. It wasn't up to code, it didn't have HOA approval, and worst of all, she had fined someone else for the same thing. The hypocrisy was delicious. I didn't even need to say anything. The moment those records hit the HOA forum, the comments exploded. Wait, so we've all been living under Karen's dictatorship and she's been breaking the rules this whole time? She fined me $100 for leaving my garbage bins out too long, but her entire patio is illegal? The next morning, Karen lost it. She went door to door, screaming at neighbors, begging people to change their votes, threatening lawsuit. She was on the verge of tears, her power slipping through her fingers. When she finally got to my house, she was shaking with rage and desperation. "You set this up," she accused, pointing a finger at me like a cartoon villain. I sipped my coffee. "Set what up?" She threw her hands in the air. "My reputation is ruined. They're trying to remove me from the HOA board." I raised an eyebrow. Wow, that must be really frustrating. Almost as frustrating as someone canceling your birthday party for no reason. Karen's eye twitched. "This isn't over," she hissed. "I'll find another way to." Ding. Her phone went off. She glanced at it. Then her face drained of color. A new HOA-wide emergency vote had just gone live. Should Karen be removed from the HOA board? I checked my phone. Votes were coming in fast. It was not looking good for her. Karen was spiraling, and it was glorious to watch. The vote to remove her from the HOA board was live, and within minutes, the results were overwhelmingly against her. She had ruled the neighborhood with an iron fist for years, but now? People were finally free to speak out against her. I could see the panic in her eyes as she frantically refreshed her phone, her face shifting from rage to desperation. She had spent so long controlling this community, fining people for the smallest infractions, that she had never even considered what would happen if they all turned on her. But Karen? She wasn't going down without a fight. The very next day, I woke up to find a new notice taped to my door, only this time it wasn't from the HOA. It was from a lawyer. A cease and desist letter. Apparently, Karen had decided that if she couldn't beat me through the HOA, she would try to sue me personally. The letter claimed I was defaming her, ruining her reputation, and causing emotional distress. I burst out laughing. Emotional distress? This was the same woman who had threatened to fine people for leaving their sprinklers on too long, and now she wanted to play the victim? But fine. If Karen wanted to take it to the legal level, I was more than happy to play along. I called a lawyer, explained the situation, and sent them everything I had: the HOA votes, the viral posts, the recordings of Karen's public meltdowns. My lawyer barely made it through the first email before laughing. "She has no case," he said flatly. "If anything, she's the one who could be sued." See, Karen had been weaponizing the HOA rules for years, making up infractions and wrongfully fining people. Not only that, but the construction records proving her illegal patio extension? That could get her in actual trouble. We decided to wait it out, let Karen dig her own grave. And oh, did she dig fast. That weekend, she forced an emergency HOA meeting, trying to rally the few remaining people on her side. She had lost her iron grip over the board, but she still had a few loyal followers, the same people who benefited from her nonsense over the years. I made sure to attend the meeting, sitting front and center, sipping my drink while Karen paced at the front of the room, her voice shrill with frustration. "This entire neighborhood is falling apart," she cried. We are being taken over by people who don't respect order, rules, decency. Someone in the back snorted. Karen, you find my grandma because she put a garden gnome in her yard. A murmur of agreement spread through the room. Karen's control was slipping, and she could feel it. Desperate, she tried to turn the focus back on me. This is all his fault, she shrieked, pointing at me. He's mocking the HOA. He's turning our community into a joke. We cannot allow this kind of chaos. I raised an eyebrow. Karen, are you suggesting that bounce houses are more dangerous than, say, illegal patio extensions? Her face turned an ugly shade of red. This is not about me, she snapped. This is about preserving the values of our community. I leaned back, stretching my arms. Funny. Because I think the community values are speaking pretty loudly right now. I gestured to the live vote projected on the HOA screen. The results? 92% in favor of removing Karen from the board. She turned as pale as a ghost. No. No, this is wrong, she shrieked. You're all being manipulated. He's a troublemaker. He's destroying everything I built. A voice from the back muttered, yeah, that's kinda the point. And just like that, the HOA officially voted Karen out. But she wasn't done yet. Oh no. Karen was so furious that she pulled one final, desperate move. She called the city inspectors to report my entire inflatable house as a safety hazard. Within an hour, 2 city officials showed up at my door, looking very, very confused as they stared up at the giant inflatable fortress. We got a report that this is, unsafe? One of them said, clearly trying not to laugh. I had already done my homework. I handed them all my permits, showing that the structure was temporary and completely legal. The inspectors walked around for 10 minutes, took some photos, and left. As they drove off, I turned to Karen, who had been standing across the street, arms crossed, fuming. Nice try, I called out. Maybe next time, try reading the actual laws before wasting everyone's time. She turned and stormed back into her house, slamming the door so hard the windows shook. The next morning, a for sale sign appeared in her yard. Karen had lost. The for sale sign in Karen's yard was the chef's kiss to this entire saga. It was as if the universe itself had delivered a perfectly wrapped gift, complete with a giant inflatable bow. The neighborhood had won. Karen was leaving. And best of all, I still had a bounce house empire standing tall in my front yard. Word of her downfall spread faster than wildfire. Neighbors I had barely spoken to before suddenly wanted to shake my hand, bringing over celebratory beers and high-five. One older couple even stopped by just to say thank you. Turns out, Karen had been harassing them for years about their too colorful garden gnome collection. Honestly, we were thinking about moving because of her. The old man chuckled, looking at my inflatable fortress with pure admiration. But now? We might stick around. That was when it hit me. This wasn't just about my petty revenge. This was bigger. Karen had ruled this community like a wannabe dictator for years, and all it took to bring her down was a little creativity, a lot of patience, and one absolutely ridiculous bounce house. With Karen out of the picture, the HOA was already changing. The remaining board members, including Greg, the one sane guy, decided to revamp the rulebook to prevent future Karens from pulling the same power move. Suddenly, things like fun, community events, and harmless decorations weren't being treated like threats to society. And that's when I knew exactly what I had to do next. It was time for a party. No, the party. The ultimate, unrestricted, no Karen Insight celebration. Within minutes of announcing it on the neighborhood Facebook page, RSVPs were pouring in. The neighbors were ready. This was their victory too. Food trucks? Booked. DJ? Hired. Bounce house obstacle course? Upgraded to 3 times the size. I even got a permit for fireworks, because if we were going to celebrate the fall of an HOA tyrant, we were going to do it right. The day of the party arrived, and the entire street was buzzing with energy. People were dressed in ridiculous outfits, bringing their kids, their pets. Hell, even the mayor's office sent a representative because apparently, my story had gained so much traction that the city was fully in support of celebrating Karen's departure. By sunset, my yard had turned into a full-blown festival. Music, laughter, drinks flowing. It was exactly the kind of thing Karen had spent years trying to suppress. And the best part? Even the HOA board members, the very people who had once been under Karen's thumb, showed up to party. Greg clapped me on the back, grinning as he looked around at the chaos. Never thought I'd say this, but I think we actually owe you one. I raised an eyebrow. Oh? You mean for single-handedly freeing this neighborhood from tyranny? He laughed. That, and for giving us the perfect excuse to rewrite the dumbest HOA rules in history. At some point during the night, someone handed me a microphone and demanded a speech. A crowd gathered as I climbed up onto a makeshift stage, which was, of course, an inflatable throne. I looked out at my neighbors, at the smiling faces, the kids running around with glow sticks, the absurdity of it all, and I just grinned. Ladies and gentlemen, I started, pausing for dramatic effect. We are gathered here today to celebrate the official downfall of the worst HOA Karen in history. A wave of cheers erupted. Someone started chanting, "And no more Karen! And no more Karen!" And within seconds the entire party joined in. I held up my hands for silence, barely able to keep from laughing. She tried to ban my birthday party. She tried to sue me. She tried to take down this bounce house empire. I gestured to the massive, inflatable kingdom behind me. But in the end, she lost. Another roar of cheers. So I just have one thing left to say, I continued. To Karen, wherever she is. Hope you're enjoying your new neighborhood. The crowd lost it. That night, we partied until well past midnight. The fireworks lit up the sky, the bounce houses stayed inflated, and the energy was electric. But perhaps the most satisfying moment came the next morning. As I groggily stepped outside, still in yesterday's party clothes, I noticed a black SUV parked in front of Karen's old house. The new buyers were moving in. Curious, I wandered over. A couple stood outside, scanning the neighborhood with interest. They looked oddly familiar. Then, it hit me. They were some of the people who had gone viral for their own HOA revenge stories. I raised an eyebrow. Wait a second, you guys aren't just moving in here to mess with HOAs, are you? The man smirked. Let's just say, we have a reputation. I grinned. This was going to be fun. And with that, the neighborhood was officially Karen-free. The HOA had been reformed, and my legendary bounce house revenge was complete. But if there was one thing I had learned from this entire experience, it was that there was always another Karen lurking somewhere, and when that time came, I'd be ready.